So, another minute or so.
כבר זהו, זה כבר הקלטה
Okay,
הופעלה.
all right. I'm going to start this. ועכשיו התחלנו. Okay, welcome to another installment of Olim Paveway's Toolbox Talks. 28 minutes of Tzahalese for Olim. My name is Sid Slifko, and tonight's topic is titled An Olim's Guide to Tzahalese, or Tzahalit, if we want to be accurate. Tzahalit is a term that was coined by the linguist, modern linguist Ruvik Rosenthal, who actually wrote a book on the subject called Diukan Sifat Hatzava HaYisraelit, or in English, a lexicon of Tzahalese, the lingo of the Israeli army. If you're interested in looking for it, it's available from Geffen Publishing, and hopefully we'll ask him to appear here at some future date, because he writes more than just works on Tzahalit, and he's very, very adept at Hebrew slang. And I'll explain a little bit more as we get to the end. So let's begin with the basic question. What is Tzahalit? Well, Tzahalit is a unique blend of Hebrew military jargon, abbreviations, humor, and code words that originated in the Israel Defense Force, the Tzahal, Tzava Hagana Yisrael. And since that time, it has also infiltrated into daily Israeli life. Now, my first personal encounter with Tzahalit was actually in an ulpan, when our teacher used the phrase she'elat kitbag, or as it translates into English, a kitback question. Does anybody have an idea what that is? A kitback question? Somebody know? Well, if you don't know, I will explain to you.
I know what it is. Were you
I'm sorry?
asking for people to guess? I know what it is, but were you asking people to guess, or did you want people to tell you what?
No, tell me if you know, please.
So it's when a soldier is part of a unit and the commander says, everybody go run 5 kilometers. And there's always going to be one soldier who says to the commander, should we take our kit bags with us? Those are the army bags that you carry on your back. And so the commander is going to say, sure, okay. You ask the question, so I'll say yes. And then all of the other soldiers are angry at that guy for asking if they need to take the kit bag. So any question that you shouldn't ask because you don't want the answer to be yes, then that's a kit bag question.
You got it. Absolutely. Yael, right on the money. And I am generally the one that's guilty of asking the stupid kitback questions. And I'm usually the one that gets punished. And sometimes I get everybody else punished. In the yeshiva world, we would call it, it's worse than a klotzkash, which is the question that an idiot asks. If they don't mention it, don't say it. So yes, that's 100% right. And that was my first introduction to this idea of Tzahalit. The history of Tzahalit, thank you very much. It was born in the barracks. It was born in the command post. It was born in the field kitchens. And because almost every Israeli serves in the military, it becomes a very unique shared experience. Over time, soldiers created a fast, informal way to communicate, and it's usually filled with acronyms like Tzahal, or Patzmar, and we'll talk about that afterwards, and puns and inside jokes. And after they finish their service, they bring that language back home into their daily lives, into the universities, into the workplace, into media, basically everything having to do with life in Israel. So if you have a son or daughter or relative that goes to the Tzahal, that goes to the military service and comes back, don't be surprised if they will come back speaking an entirely different language. And don't worry, because this is something that happens over the course of time in every, I won't say generation, but certainly every few years when there's a new wave of conscripts that go into the army. Tzahalit is efficient. It's expressive, and it's very often playful. It's full of acronyms, as I said, like SAMAL, which stands for Segen Mishne Lelo Samchut, or words like Jobnik, which is a slightly mocking term for someone with a non-combat desk job. But there are also kinds of metaphors. For example, the one I'm familiar with from my kids when they went to the army is Sabah and Tsair. Literally, Sabah and Tsair mean grandfather and youngster. But it also relates to the years of experience that a soldier puts into the army. One of my kids, who was all of 20 when he was in the reserves and attached to a unit of newer recruits, was called Saba, because as a reservist with a whopping 2.5 years of military experience, he was the senior in the group. And his brother, who was a twin, who was all of 30 seconds his junior, is called Tzair, junior. And sometimes when the two of them argue, and my older twin wants to shut the younger twin up, he will say Shatz, which is an acronym in Tzahalese that stands for Shtok Tzair, which impolitely I could say means shut up kid or quiet youngster. But the acronym SHATS is also an acronym that's used for Shliach Tzibur, which is the person who leads the congregational service. So in addition to just being a rather diminutive and somewhat insulting response, it's also a play on words. And then you have a word like falafelim in the army. Falafelim literally refers to the bowls of falafel that you'd get buying a sandwich. But in the army, it also refers to the pips that you find on an officer's uniform. And again, it's cute, it's engaging, it's not intimidating at all when you're talking about an officer who comes around with falafelim on his shoulders. This is the way Tzahalese works. But it's also crept into, as I said, the daily language. Tzahalese is now a real part of everyday Hebrew. It's from the army, but it's stuck. For example, phrases that are often used that have some origin in the military service. For example, when you hear somebody who's Israeli say, kapara alecha, kapara alecha, it's a very biblical or highfalutin term, but it's really a term of endearment. It's a term of infection. And it started with the Mizrahi soldiers who picked up from their culture, where it meant something entirely different. It meant kind of like what Southerners say, God bless you. And it's now become, again, part of our culture. We have a wonderful singing group in Israel called Tepex, and the lead singer usually gets up on the stage, and before he starts performing, he says "Kapar Alecha," and the whole audience breaks out in a response the same way. Al hapanim is an Israeli phrase that we hear a lot, and it literally means exactly what it says. Al hapanim literally means on your face. Generally, when you hear the word al hapanim, you can envision somebody on a skateboard hitting a crack in the sidewalk. The skateboard falls and he falls flat on his face. That's what al hapanim is, and it has its origin in the military jargon, and it means something terrible, not just a battlefield term anymore, but almost anything that spells a tragedy, a catastrophe, or just a miserable situation. And then, of course, zerem, which can mean many things. Often it meant that we were referring to a stream, as in which stream of Judaism, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. But zerem also means go with the flow. And that started in combat, in military jargon, and it's now become part of everything now, to go with the flow. What does Tzahalese say about Israel life. Now, we know that in English, there are many words that come from military life into our own daily life. Words like fubar or snafu, which are generally abbreviations for military situations. I'm not going to go into it. I'm going to say, if you're really curious, look it up. But in Tzahalese, it's even stronger because so many Israelis have put in their time in the military. So it really becomes a very almost inseparable aspect of Israeli identity. It's reflective of values like improvisation. For example, Rosh Gadol versus Rosh Katan. Rosh Gadol literally means big head. That refers to somebody who's thinking beyond the parameters outside the box. And Rosh Katan, somebody who's narrow-minded, somebody who's small-minded. It reflects irony, it reflects cynicism, but it also reflects national trauma. And as with most Jewish values, it reflects humor, pride, and definitely camaraderie. Phrases like achla, which generally means great or awesome or fantastic, or sof haderech, which literally means the end of the road, but it generally refers to the end of the story. In other words, Tzahalese is not merely a language or a slang or a jargon. Tzahalese is actually a shared identity. And when you start understanding it and when you start speaking it, we'll talk about that afterwards, it means you share that identity as well. And when you can understand it, you can give yourself a pat on the back and say, now I get what it's like to be an Israeli. And I'm cautioning everybody because this is very important. I'm speaking to you and sharing honestly as a parent. Don't think that using Tzahalese, not talking about listening, I'm talking about speaking. Don't think that using Tzahalese is an automatic pass to Israeli identity. I can tell you that when I use it at home and my two sons are with me, they still see me as an Olim nerd. At best, maybe it's because of my pronunciation, because I make a very, very decided effort to not mimic or speak like an Israeli. So whatever I say, even if it's in perfect Hebrew, still sounds kind of dumb. But whatever the reason is, I cannot speak Tzahalese the way my kids speak Tzahalese, and that's okay. But it does help me to understand what they're saying when they talk about someone who's a jobnik, that is somebody who served but didn't do anything like serious combat, or when they describe a commander that they have who is a tzahov. Now, the word tzahov, if you know Hebrew, tzahov means yellow. And what is a person who is tzahov in military jargon? It's somebody who's doing everything exactly by the book in an almost obsessive, anal retentive fashion. I can't use the word, even though I can pronounce it properly. And if I do, they'll laugh at me and say, you don't know what you're talking about. And they're probably right. But if you hear somebody using a word like that, or if they use any word in Tzahalese, then you can understand what it is that they're saying, and that's the important thing. On the other hand, and this happens a lot, and it's certainly happening to me even now, having my two soldiers sitting at the table. If you hear somebody using Tzahalese and you're confused about the meaning of the words, well, here are some useful tips. Number one, if you have an Israeli friend and you hear somebody using a word in Tzahalese, in slang, and generally anything that you didn't learn in Ulpan is probably related to Tzahalese, ask an Israeli friend to explain what it means. See if they understand it. There is a distinct possibility that they won't understand it because, as with any slang and any patois, language evolves. So the previous wave of soldiers, you can understand what they say if you listen, but the next wave of soldiers can be speaking Tzahalese, but it's a different version of Tzahalese. It's a more updated version of Tzahalese. It's something that they don't necessarily presume to speak, to try and translate for you. And very often they'll do it to have their own jargon amongst themselves. But see if you can find out. Ask an Israeli friend. Number two, if you really want to keep up with the slang and you're in Israel, watch Israeli comedies like Eretz Nehederet or one of those modern TV shows. You'll hear a lot of Tzahalese. And if you don't understand it, somebody will explain it to you. But staying abreast of it, it's the equivalent of watching modern sitcoms on American TV, and you pick up the language, the jargon that's used in modern English. That's the way you stay abreast of it. You won't necessarily get it from your kids or from the people who are there, but at least you can pick it up in one form or another. And finally, make sure that you use what you learn, but use carefully. Because to be perfectly honest, while there are some terms in Tzahalese that are casual and appropriate for almost every situation, there are other terms that are crude or very ironic. The one that comes to mind for me is the word that I learned, which is kastach, which is another Tzahalese phrase, and I am not going to translate it except to say that kastach is the process of making sure that you are not blamed for something, and I will say belashon nikiya, covering your tracks, and we'll leave it at that. Couple of final thoughts. Number one, Tzahalese is really the doorway into the soul of the Israeli culture, and I can't stress how accurate that description is. Tzahalese is how Israelis bond and how we all bond together with a common shared experience of living in Israel. It's how the soldiers vent. It's how Israelis vent. And I've seen it so many times when I put my own kids with other Israelis and my kids with American kids of their same age. There is a special, unique bond of people who have gone through the same experience together, the trauma, the joys, the ups, the downs. There is something about Tzahalese that brings them all together, and they can, even over difficult situations, they can laugh as they reminisce. And it's very important for a bonding experience. And when you understand it, you can also share at least the echoes of the bonding, if not necessarily the actual bonding process. It's a way to vent. It reminds them of experience that they shared, but also frustrations that they have. And again, not necessarily in a terrible fashion, but very definitely in an empathetic fashion. The Israeli military experience, I've heard it said many times, and I've seen it from my own experience with our kids, it's a maturation process that's unmatched. They have, my sons have cousins who are graduating from university this weekend, and while I'm very proud of their cousins, I also know that from my own personal experience and seeing my kids here and the kids there, my kids have gone through so much and they have experienced so much in life. They have matured in a way that American college students do not, and Tzahalese is part of that maturation process. If you have an opportunity, read the book by Douglas Murray on democracy and death cults, where he talks about the distinction between kids who grow up in Western societies, in America, in England, in Canada, in Australia, versus kids who grow up in Israel and the things that they have seen. And he is amazed at just how different their attitudes are, their maturation levels are, the protracted adolescence of being in the university versus the instant adulthood of being in Tzahal, and Tzahalit is part of that experience. There are also words that you need to keep in mind that don't go out of style and have become so ingrained in Israeli society as a result of Tzahalit. For example, and I learned this one this weekend, the Hebrew word Madonna. It's a Tzahalit word. What does it mean? Madonna refers to the lightweight microphone and headset that soldiers wear. And where do you think that name came from? Well, for those of you who follow pop culture, it came from Madonna, who used to go on stage with the little microphone and headset and perform. And that's the word that they use. Or the word like totach, which in Hebrew means cannon. But when you refer to a person as a totach, you're also referring to somebody who is an amazing person, a wonderful, outstanding person, or even a situation. It's a totach, it's a cannon. It's fantastic. It's kaleidoscopic, you could say in English. Soldiers always come back with new terms, but the old terms tend to stick. And some of them don't seem to make any sense, but if you delve into the history, you'll see that ultimately they do make sense. And because the new terms come out from time to time, that's actually a good thing for people like us, for Olim, because the truth is, since they come out with new terms, everybody's at a disadvantage. People who served in Tzahal a generation ago will listen to Tzahalit of today, and they'll scratch their heads in bewilderment the same way as Olim today, who moved to Israel. They don't understand it because, as with all terminology, as with all words, this is a process of evolution. And that's why it's so important to learn Tzahalit, to learn the process of Tzahalit, because it's not really just a matter of mastering slang terms. It's a matter of becoming part of the Israeli story, the Israeli history. To help you with understanding Tzahalit and the process of Tzahalit, I have uploaded a file of basic Tzahalit terms. There's actually about 49. I figure since we are between Pesach and Shavuot, then I would light on 49 terms. They're taken from a lexicon that we are preparing called Pave Speech. I put the link to the list of words in the chat. You can download it and find it as well. It's called Basic Tzahalit, a work in progress. Take a look at it. And I urge you not only to look at it, but add your own words to it and create your own personal lexicon of Tzahalit, because this is a work that doesn't end. And you are always going to be updating it and changing it around and seeing how things work, because language evolves in any culture. And this is just one aspect of Israeli language that is evolving, still evolving, and will continue to evolve as time goes on. So take a look at it. It's a dictionary of Hebrew phrases, idioms, and you'll see it, and hopefully the book itself will be released before year's end. I've also put up a few more links that I think are worthwhile. One is the link to our website, where you'll find all kinds of videos and helpful hints, and a link as well to our YouTube channel, which includes not only past toolbox talks and videos, but also panel discussions on important issues that affect the Jewish communities, both in Israel and in the diaspora. And I invite you, if you have any suggestions for future presentations, please don't hesitate to write me. The the links that you need to write me, the links that you need that I'm inviting you to check, are in the chat as well. So please feel free, open it, take a look at it. And with that, my friends, we have reached the Sof Haderech. It's the end of the story. So Toolbox Talks will return next Sunday with more tips for Olim to make your klita, to make your absorption smoother and easier. And on behalf of Olim Paveway, I wish all of you a good week. Here in New York, there is the Israel Day Parade that's going on, and I should let you know that it is apparently a big, big deal. It's even being broadcast on regular TV, not just cable. And once again, I want to give Israel a shout out for its, if not victory, but its very impressive showing last night at Eurovision. So with that, again, have a good week and shalom. And I'm going to